8 and 9. And topic 8 is how to motivate and lead. And topic 9 is strategic planning. And one of my favorite topics because that's my wheelhouse in today's world. So I spent many years doing corporate planning, like in terms of strategic planning and business planning. I've done for many small-sized and medium-sized enterprises. So one of my favorite subjects. So we'll get started. And before we get started, I guess, any questions at all? Would you have a question, Aaron or Aislinn? Anything that I could help you with? If not, just give me a thumbs up and we'll get going. Okay. All right. So just a reminder. So I'm going to talk about test 2 because as of today, we will have covered topic 8, and test 2 is going to cover 5, 6, 7, 8. So you could already start studying basically. But I want to remind you that things are highlighted, things are bolded. Sometimes I use the golden key, and a lot of time I use arrows to really kind of give you a sense of what's important. And I'll just remind you that not everything are on these slides or is on these slides. It's basically to point you to other areas of in Blackboard, in terms of the Blackboard slide deck, and then the actual PowerPoints that are really important because they're high in content and will really help you round out what you need to know about the content, especially towards the tests and all the other pieces. So I'll go through that study path. Again, I have a slide to go through that, but these are the indicators inside of the commentary presentations. So the key ones are the commentary presentations. The next important ones are the PowerPoints that are from the e-text, the Robbins PowerPoints, and then everything that we really cover in the participation activities is key, so that you'll get some inkling of what gets covered there. Okay, so for topic 8. Yeah, let me just talk about test 2. It's going to be much like test number 1. And what I've done is I've graduated the marks from test 1 to test 2 to test 3. So test 1 is based on 10 marks of your final mark. Test 2 is based on 15 marks, and test 3 is based on 20 marks. So test 1 was really to give you a sense of what's there in case something went sideways a little bit. You have time to recover and work the best of your marks through test 2 and test 3, right? And again, test 2 will be online. It'll be remote on Blackboard. You access it in topic 10. It will be available. It will show up or appear, on your Blackboard at 8 a.m. on Tuesday, June the 3rd, until Wednesday, 11:59 p.m., June the 4th. And again, there's practice tests. So in topic number 8, you'll see that there's some tests that you can go through, and then again, it's mainly multiple choice questions. It's 50 multiple choice and true and false questions. The duration 80 minutes. It self-submits. And again, please be prepared. Have your lockdown browser downloaded. Verify that your webcam is working. And again, if things are stuck, the first thing to try to do, even before calling me, is just go to your cache, empty your cache, and reboot. And chances are a lot of the problems go away. All right, so that's where that is. And you can see here in topic 10, there's an announcement about the test, and then this is the link, where you click on this link to be able to find the test. Okay, so that's where that is. Okay, Aaron, do you have a question at all? I see you're highlighted here.
I do. Just getting a bit ahead of myself for the 3rd exam. The time slot, is that the time that's required for that, or do we have a day or two just like
these? No, that's a locked-in time slot. All right, it'll be from 9 till 10:30 a.m. And I've got a slide in this presentation as well that covers that all off.
Okay,
and thank you for that, because that's been a question that at least 3 or 4 students now have asked me, and that's why I put this slide in here to kind of reinforce that. Now, and that's why I'm asking you. It's near the end of the term. And since it's the end of the term, you have to get a hold of me before the test if there's some reason that you can't take that particular time slot, and I'll reschedule it. But again, the marks are due a certain few days after that. so that there's very little time to maneuver. So let me know ahead of time if there's some specific reason and you have a validated reason for not being able to actually attend at that particular time. Okay. All right.
And it's online as well. We don't have to go into the
It's
school.
online, yeah. And again, you need your lockdown browser, you need your webcam to be working, but it's totally online, so you can take it from wherever you want to, from where you ever want to. Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks for that question. Okay, so just about test number 2, though, what I emphasize, and I think I've talked about this before, is that these particular documents that I put in Google Docs are really important. And it would make a lot of good sense to not only as you follow that study approach that I have, go to these particular 2 documents. One is, Connecting Theorists to Tools and Techniques, because it covers the connection between the Rebel surveys and the theorists and the theories. And then The Brief History of Management by Robbins, where I've actually incorporated all the theorists and theories that we cover in the course. So, you're going to see that. And test number 2 is going to cover a fair amount of the actual theories and theorists as well, from generally speaking type of questions. And that's why you'll see in this presentation, there's a fair amount of review of the different theorists and theories. That's not to say that it's all inclusive. That's why I'm asking you to go through these documents. And one other thing is that this YouTube video, it's very short, it's 15 minutes, but it covers all the leadership theories, and it's a really good review, of the styles and whatnot, so that will really give you a good sense of, this course coming together. Okay. All right. So again, if you have a Chromebook, I don't think anyone in this class does, but it works a little differently. The platform for the lockdown browser is not all inclusive, and there's a couple of extra little things about Chromebook that you have to be aware of. So again, have a look at that. The library is your best resource to help you do that. And again, troubleshooting, clear the cache and cookies in Google Chrome, update your Chromebook operating system, and you're up and running. Okay. All right. So here's the piece. I talked about the commentary. PowerPoints are really important. So there'll be 5, 6, 7, 8. The Robbins eText PowerPoint chapters that are include that cover topics 5 to 8. They're all listed here. Again, you access to test number 2 and topic 10. And then this is the a facsimile of what the link looks like. And again, it's Tuesday, 8 a.m., June the 3rd until Wednesday, June the 4th at 11:59 p.m. All right, so that's the study approach. And again, I can't say enough about these particular documents that would really complement your study on getting ready for test number 2. Okay, so here's all the deliverables that we're looking at. So you've got a lot of surveys to be able to do, and some of these are crucial, to the participation activities as well, and I'll highlight those. And then in terms of participation topic 8A, there's a survey that you download. You click on this least preferred coworker and you get your score, and then you complete the participation topic 8A. And again, topic 8B is a group submission, and that's really about organization for developing and sustaining a diverse and inclusive workplace. And you'll see that intercultural sensitivity, multicultural awareness, company culture, those kind of things are all connected to this. So it's a good idea, to go through your surveys before your group wants to tackle that particular participation activity. So here's the chapters, the Robbins chapters that complement the information. So chapter 6 is about human resource management. 7 is managing innovation and change, which is absolutely crucial. I mean, this is going to be your life going forward, is that the rate of change is going to increase like it has for me over my years at a phenomenal rate. It just goes faster and faster. But that's the only constant, is that change changes faster. All right. And then understanding groups and teams. And that's why I kind of introduced, the learning team charter and the different stages development for the group. You're going to see that in chapter 8. And then leadership. And again, this is for you. This leadership part is that here's where you can make a difference. And we're going to talk about, again, triple bottom line, and we're going to talk about circular economics, to be able to increase the capabilities of whatever product or service that you're offering and how it complements sustainability. So leadership is really important. Managing communication and information, that's absolutely key. And I hope, since we started this course, that I've really emphasized that communication is the currency in business. And that's why you should not only be able to write, more, I guess, effectively, you need to speak effectively too. And those two talents will really put you in that top 20% of elite performers. That's where you can really make a difference. And I know I've seen it in my career. Those people who could do those two things, they really developed and went on to bigger things that, in their careers. Okay, so topic A, you just submit the score, the LPC score, and we're going to talk about that. And this is the least preferred co-worker score. And we're going to talk about, the Fiedler and how he brought this about. But this is a key thing to understand, because now we're getting into, situational management. And depending on the situation and your particular predominant style and where you can be strong and where you won't be strong, becomes very evident. And that's why this particular participation activity is really important for you. So what I'd like you to do then is that you do the survey. You don't hand in or a screen shot of the survey that you completed. You just use the score, and then you answer these questions. What type of leader are you based on that least preferred score? And you're going to see the cutoff numbers on that score, and we're going to talk about that. And then, are you task-oriented or relationship-oriented? So depending on your score, that's what you're going to find out. And then, do your LPC results correlate with your previous Pearson Revel surveys tell you about yourself? And again, why it matters. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for 2 paragraphs, but I'm looking for you to really kind of do some critical thinking around, hey, this fits. Or sometimes, if you're right in the middle of that score, you're not quite sure, am I a relationship-oriented leader? Am I a task-oriented? And here's what I think, based on what I've seen in the Revel surveys about myself. And here's, based on some, maybe the experience that I've had as an individual. So, that's where that piece is. So again, when you go to topic 8, you just download this document. It's a PDF, and then just, circle your scores, and then you total those scores. And what happens then is that, let me see here. So, if your score is less than 57, it means that you're task-oriented. If your score is greater than 64, then you're relationship-oriented. So some people are stuck in the middle here. And I'll comment on this slide right away, all right? Because this is Fiedler's work that he's done. And what Fiedler has done is he's looked at 8 different situations. And you can see that based on these 3 characteristics, the leader-member relationship, if you've got a strong relationship with your workers, the task structure, is it very structured or least structured, and the leader's position power, based on these 3 things, you can see that if you're relationship-oriented, for these particular situations, your performance is high. For these particular situations, your performance will be low. So what does that really tell you? It tells you that there should be other different management styles you have in your back pocket to use, because you're not going to be effective if you're going to use your predominant style all the way through these different situations. And then on the next few, if you're relationship oriented, here's where you thrive in these kind of situations. So you'll see that, here's the aspect of the situation for these 3 conditions. right? And you can see on the front end and the back end, if you're relationship oriented, you're a little bit in trouble here, okay? So that's what this is all about. That's why it's just so important to really understand, the least preferred coworker questionnaire and what it can do for you, because it really gives you a sense of where your vulnerabilities are, depending on where you are. Okay. So again, let me just get back to that. So what you're doing is you report your least preferred coworker score, and then you answer those particular questions in that piece. But also, look at this video. I'm not going to play this video, but if you play this video, it really goes through and it explains, what I've done under these three different circumstances or dimensions: leader-member relations. Do you have a tight relationship? Do they trust you, or do you have a loose relationship? Or like in terms of loose, you might be manager of a 200-person call center. So naturally, you don't have some great leader-member relations there, but you do have position power, and you do have task structure, because the computer is helping you look over the management of those 200 people. So that's what this is all about. And what the video does explain is leadership behaviors through those three dimensions, describing the situation and how to assess what type of leader fits for each situation, to know, where you need to make, these changes and pull out that other management style that you can use. Okay, so I explained that. So I spoke about any questions at all, or want to just give me a thumbs up and I'll keep going? Okay, let's keep going. All right. So here's where, for 8B, I highlighted these three particular surveys, are really germane, to what you need to do in participation topic 8B. So if anything, do these three surveys if you don't really do all of them, before you tackle this with your group. All right. And what you need to do then is that, I want you to kind of really get a sense of, what is surface level diversity? And again, you can review the slides 93 to 96, in the topic 8 slide deck, and this will really kind of, help you understand all of this. And then, comment on this particular one. What's the role of deep level diversity, and what's the role of hidden diversity? And oh, by the way, if you want to use AI, that's fine. But just let me know. Just put down, hey, we've used AI on this particular one. But what you need to understand as well is that this information will come in very handy if your group decides to do a particular question in the assignment number 4 for Amazon. Remember, you're picking your own questions, right? To make up just a little at 100 marks or above the 100 marks. So that, if you choose this question, you've done a lot of the work for it, all right? Or the question that's related to this, I should say. Okay, so sustaining a diverse and inclusive workplace. So here's the different types. So the surface level, this is form of characteristic individuals, in terms of, the diversity of, like physical diversity and whatever, and visible disabilities, race and sex. The deep level is the non-observable stuff, the stuff that's kind of, below in the iceberg, all right? The attitudes, the values, the beliefs, such as religion, they're not obvious. But, after you're working in that organization, you kind of get a sense of what's going on. And then the actual hidden diversity. These may be concealed or revealed at discretion, by individuals who possess them, as say maybe sexual orientation. So the thing is you need to be aware of all that, all these aspects of that. And I just wanted to put this slide in, because right now, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness is under attack. There's no doubt about it. And the thing is, and it doesn't matter where you are, maybe in Europe or in North America or whatever. But here's some articles saying, what we're talking about here is not irrelevant. It's not going away is really what I'm saying. And you can see that just from these articles, like DEI is a lightning rod for controversy, but the practice isn't dead. That's what the BBC reported. This one here, the claim that DEI initiatives are dead in the US is inaccurate. And this is I think this was a Forbes article. All right. And then here's a death of DEI is a myth. Here's why, this is the Forbes one. Here's why 7 and 8 companies are continuing these efforts. So they're not going away. And I wanted to make that point so that, this isn't fleeting. It's been around for a long time. It's the way businesses do things. And even though in the US, if they're being sort of asked to, get away from DEI practices, they're still in place. And yet they're just called something else. Okay. All right. So here's where you look at this continuum. And the thing is that, the work group processes or outcomes, when you're talking about discrimination and fairness, well, these are race related. The conflicts, are not discussed. There's low employee morale, when there's this piece going. With access and legitimacy, well, there's little discussion about the conflict. There's low employee morale. There's differential power status, and then if you don't integrate, the conflict stems from cultural differences. So you need to have a sense of how do you bring this together? How do you get people to accept the overall core values and norms of the organization, and outline the benefits of doing that, and getting through that, and having everyone understand that diversity is an absolute strength, and it's proven in the stock market. The Fortune 500 companies, most of them have very diverse boards for specific reasons. It brings different opinions, it brings different perspectives, and you do a lot more critical thinking around what the organization has to do. So it's here to stay. All right. So benefits of board diversity: enhanced decision making, increased creativity and innovation, improved stakeholder representation, enhanced corporate social responsibility. So it's got a lot of these great benefits. And some people, are they're doing the spin. It's called tokenism. It's the practice of doing something like maybe hiring a person who belongs to a minority group only to prevent criticism, or position themselves to look like they're embracing diversity. And the thing is that if it's not done for the right reasons, well, there's stress, and there's higher burnout rate, so it's got to be done for the right reasons. And the role of management, well, how do you get that there? Well, how do you structure interviews to avoid bias in recruiting? Diversified mentoring relationships, inclusive corporate culture. So those are all the tools, to be able to get you to, this work group process and outcomes that really takes the advantage of diversity and leverages it and brings success to the organization. Okay, so motivating and leading then, what is it? Well, it's more around the leadership. It's leading teams. It's cross-cultural leadership, it's corporate culture, it's leading through change. And those are the key things that are going to make you successful. And what is it? Is that, and you can see now that we're starting to get into some highlighting, leader, you're influencing others, you're inspiring others to see themselves in a shared vision and understand the strategy. And I keep on going back to this research that I read, is that only 9% of North American workers really can make the connection with what they're doing in their job with the overall strategy of the organization. So that's where leadership comes in, is to really explain and show them how their contribution matters. Critical thinking, right? And so it's a process of influencing and inspiring individuals or groups towards achievement of goals. So they see why they're doing this. And the role of the leader, well, the vision is really important. Developing and living and role modeling the strategy, getting people on board, focusing on the results, the outcomes, innovate for the future, and lead yourself, that you're all part of it. So let's go back to the role of the manager. Remember, we talked about this, I think, in the first topic, the 4 functions of management: controlling, planning, organizing, and leading. So implementation of the vision and strategy, that's really the role of the manager. But again, I keep on going back to this piece, is that, way back in my time, you were a manager or you were a leader. In today's world, because of the dynamics of what's going on and the rates of change and the requirements for transformation, you need both. You need to be a strong leader and a strong manager to be able to make it happen. And look at the attributes of the manager: clear to communicate, select the right individuals for each task, motivate employees, use appropriate deadlines, all those other pieces that are really important. So again, Henry Fayol, 6 functions of management. That's where it came from. So keep that in mind, Henry Fayol, right? Those are the 6. And then from there, a lot of offshoots of information come out. So that's where it started. Just want to, give you an advertisement for this guy. This is Simon Sinek. If you go through this video, you'll really get a sense of the why and why it's so important. And guess what? When I talk about, why it matters, it's all really allowing people to understand, why they're doing things. And that's leadership. That's where you get followers, because that builds trust. All right. And so that I would recommend that you have a look at this particular piece. All right. But here now, I've taken this chart, and this comes right out of the slide deck in topic 8. So when you're looking at managers and leaders, so the managers are really focusing on the what and how. The leaders are really focusing on the direction and the guidance, the why and the how. And here's how it comes together. So what are you doing? On the manager side, planning and budgeting, you're really getting down to the nuts and bolts. From a leader, you're creating the vision and setting the direction. But guess what? If the manager doesn't understand the overall corporate vision, how could that manager really do the right kind of planning and budgeting, right? So that's why it's so important to really, bring it together on that piece. Here's another little advertisement for Switch, and this is the Heath brothers. I've read most of their books, and they're just amazing because they teach through stories. One brother is a marketer, the other brother is an educator. And if you take a look at visionary leaders, guide by articulating vision, so they're creating the vision. So the essence of this book is direct the rider, all right, motivate the elephant, those are the motivating factors, and then shape the path, make it easy, for people to do their work, take away the barriers, give them the tools, train them, make the right relationships inside the organization so that they can get what they need from other parts of the organization. All those things, are shaping the path. So this has and this is all about transformation, this book, right, called Switch. But if you take a look at how does this all fit, this is what this diagram is showing you. Don't worry about this. What you need to worry about is trait theory. And again, there's a lot of highlighting going on here. So the trait theory of leadership suggests that certain inborn or innate qualities and characteristics make someone a leader versus someone who is not a leader. And these qualities might be personality factors, physical factors, intelligence factors, and so on. And again, though that trait theory is tied into national culture as well. What's viewed as significant in a national culture? So if you take a look at North America, well, the bias is, strong, tall, male with a bass voice, somehow is seen more as a leader. Is that, that there's some aspects to that, but is it everything? No. I mean, look at Napoleon, right? He was a little shrimp, he ran a whole, army, to conquer a whole continent. So, there's different things, right? So here's some of the pieces, though, to understand that it's there, and then how does it How does that work? So this differs from the approaches taken from Hersey and Blanchard. I wanted to bring that right to the fore right away. Okay, so you may have some leadership capabilities through trait theory, but Blanchard and Hersey are talking about, and House's path goal, they're talking about the focus is on the followers. All right. So really, that's part of the conditions in situational management, is you're looking at, at what level of competence are those followers? At what level of buy-in and alignment, are those followers? And those are all key attributes of the followers that, begs what kind of management style should be used to appeal to them and to motivate them to be able to get things done. And that's what we're going to go through in this topic. Okay, so applying trait theory, trait approaches by participating in various tests, so you can see, do I have some of these? And again, if that works for you, you exercise those traits that you think could work for you in the culture that you're working in. But some organizations use personality tests to find the right people, the right traits, using tools such as Myers-Briggs test and leadership trait questionnaire. I'm a big proponent of Myers-Briggs. And again, when I was at TELUS, Myers-Briggs was a big deal there. They had a group of specialists in HR that specialized in facilitating Myers-Briggs surveys and orientation workshops. And what I used to do is each time that I got promoted, I'd bring my team in, and we would do a survey on each one of us and discuss our different Myers-Briggs attributes, and it really resulted in a better understanding a lot sooner, in the time that we were together, and getting to that that performing stage of the group a lot sooner, and it really worked for us. And again, I'm an ENTJ, so I people started to get to know what I was like, and I saw my job as bringing opportunities to the group, and they would say, oh well, Gary's doing another drive-by, bringing in that, and they'd say, well, okay, well, what do you want to drop? And we had an opportunity funnel, and I'd say, you guys work it out. Do we, can we fit this in? And should we drop something based on priorities? But again, Myers-Briggs, you can get a Myers-Briggs assessment now, basically at no charge on the internet if you look for it. Okay, this is another link that if you want to get a better understanding of your traits, just go through this video. I'm not going to cover it, but Jen is an Indeed career coach and explains the top leadership styles in management and how to identify the one that's right for you and your team. So it's a good piece to go through if you're interested. And here's some of the key traits. Drive, a desire to lead, honesty, integrity, self-confidence, cognitive intelligence, emotional intelligence, and you're going to see, that this is a big deal, in today's world in terms of having, recruiters are looking for, high levels of emotional intelligence because you can solve a lot of problems with that. Job relevant knowledge and extroversion. So that's where that is. So trait theories on leadership, they isolate the characteristics that differentiate leaders from non-leaders. So that's really where you need to do that. So what if your traits don't fit, your predominant style? Well, you may misalign with the culture. You may affect employee morale. You may create inefficiencies because they don't get what you're trying to do in terms of goals and processes. You may have high turnover. And I told you, many times now, is that the statistics or the research shows that people leave their bosses. They don't leave the company. All right. And that's because there's no connection there. So you need to understand that as well. And here, I talked about emotional intelligence. Look at what's highlighted. Recent studies show that EI is the best predictor of who will emerge as a leader. So that tells you something right away. And, Lewin, where, you've been out, been going through these things, but Lewin talks about the three leadership styles of autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire. You've covered those for assignment number 2, but here's a little more information because there's probably going to be, a few questions on test number 2 about those kind of things. Just a thing about social loafing. This is the whole idea. One of the whole main ideas around doing the student learning chart, and it's to really kind of identify if there's any free writing going on. And this would be a good article, if you want to read more about this. I've seen this throughout my corporate career, where some free writers come in and they're really good at schmoozing, but they're really no good at doing, and it really it not only lowers the morale of the group, but it causes a lot of grief and not meeting deadlines. So it's a good thing to know about. Again, Kurt Lewin, really good guy to understand and know what the 3 core leadership styles that he subscribes to, authoritarian, participative, and delegative. So, know that what's going on. And those are a few things. Now, just to talk about, Robert Blake and Jane Mountain, what they tried to do is they tried to come up with a grid theory. And again, I just want to, I'm just going to have to take this. All right. So what this is, on this particular piece where they're doing this, they look at concern for people, low to high, and then concern for production or task orientation. And you can see what they've done is that they wanted to, really find a leadership approach between McGregor's X and Y. And you can see sometimes a middle of the road style, might help in a particular culture, in a very innovative organization. Accommodating, might help because you're allowing people to be a lot more creative. So it originally identified different leadership styles based on the concerns of people and the concerns for production, and that's where this piece is. So I'm just going to put this back, and where are we here? Yeah, for current slide. Okay, all right. So here's the different definitions of those 5 areas. So it's good to have a good look at that. It's a good to be able to go through McGregor's theory again and understand what they are. And now we're starting to get into contingency theories. So really, we're going to talk about Fiedler, and that's where the participation activities are bringing you situational leadership and path goals. So situation leadership is Hersey and Blanchard, and path goal you're going to see as we go through. So Fiedler's approach, again, he identified those different leadership styles, and again, you look at this LPC questionnaire that you're going to be able to see where you're sitting at, and then I talked about this. I think I pretty well explained it, and each leadership situation is evaluated in terms of these 3 contingencies. So this is 8 different situations where in situation 1, the leader-member relationship is good, the task structure is high, and the position structure is strong. All right. So if you're if you're a task-oriented leader, I mean, you're going to thrive here, right? Your performance is going to be great. But again, in a moderate situation, where the leader-member relations is poor, and the task structure is high, and the position power is strong, you're not going to do so well. So those are the kind of things to to really understand where you're going through that. Okay. So what happens then in the situation leadership quadrants is that if the relationship behavior is high and the task behavior is low, in this particular piece, if you talk about the followers, they're able, but they're unwilling and insecure. So you need to make it participative type. All right. In this one here, where the task behavior is high and people are unwilling, unable, willing, confident followers, then you just basically have to sell, But here, if the relationship is low and the task behavior is high and they're unable and unwilling, well, then, you need to be very directive. So that's what these are all about, So in terms of, telling, the leader defines the roles, tells the people how to do the tasks. So it's really giving you a sense of how to manage in those particular situations. And that's where Hersey and Blanchard come in and build on that grid and add different situations, where that requires different styles. And here's where it all sort of comes together. And you can see that, where you need to be selling and where you need to be telling. And this one here really gives you, where are you, in terms of, where the actual followers are. Okay, so that's where that piece is. So just want to, click on this video here, and I just want to make sure. Hang on here. I just want to make sure that I'm actually sharing here. Okay, I'm sharing sound. So I want to give you a sense of this video. I'm not going to play it all, but really to give you an idea of what's going on here so that you can go back to this and get more information. Okay, here we go.
Hello and welcome to today's lesson where we're looking at the situational leadership model. So first, some background. Now, the situational leadership model was developed by Dr. Paul Hersey and Kenneth Blanchard. It's predicated on the belief that there is no one best style of leadership. The best style of leadership will depend on the situation, and that means the task to be performed and the makeup of the team performing the task. So thus, the best leaders take the time to weigh the many variables affecting their situation and then select their leadership style to best match their situation. So let's look at the model itself. Now, most of us naturally adjust our style to suit the situation, whether we realize it or not. So for example, we give a newly hired team member more slack to make mistakes than seasoned employees, and we might direct tasks more closely when a deadline is urgent and important.
Let me show you how to use Grammarly's AI features to write a more confident resume that actually lands you in the S pile. Start by writing down the following prompt along with all the responsibilities you had at your job, and remember that nothing is too small. Now we're going to banish any imposter syndrome away by clicking on More Ideas and Sounds Confident. In part of present.
Now, the situational leadership model is a framework that helps us make this adjustment of our style only in a more deliberate way. So the framework's going to help us diagnose the situation and then select the best leadership style for that situation. Now, in the model, the x-axis indicates the degree of directive behavior that the leader exerts, and that is the amount of direction that they give their team. Now, the higher the direction, the less able the team is to make decisions for themselves. And the y-axis indicates the degree of supportive behavior the leader uses, and that is the amount of support they give their team. Now, the higher the support, the more the leader helps their team to make decisions and perform their job or their role. And at the bottom of the diagram here, you can see D1 to D4, and that represents how well developed, how skilled, and how motivated a team or an individual is, with D1 being the lowest level of development and D4 being the highest. So the model proposes that there are...
Okay, so that's, I'm hoping that you've actually heard this, sorry.
4 primary leadership styles. Yeah. And the first is...
Okay, so can you just give me an idea that you did hear that? Because I did, I hope that I shared the sound okay. Just give me a thumbs up. Okay, thanks. All right, so that'll really give you an idea. It's a 10-minute video, but it's really worth going through and to really understand what Hersey and Blanchard's model is all about. But I think we kind of got to the major points of it going through, right? So now we're going to talk about House's path goal theory, and what House talks about is, and again, you can see that this is highlighted. So leader's job is to assist the follower in attaining their goals, to provide the necessary direction and support to ensure the goals are compatible, with the overall objectives of the organization. So that's what this is all about. But really, what I wanted, this particular, it's a 6-minute thing on path goal. This guy does a really good job. So I'm just going to show you this, a little bit here, and then we'll, just to give you a flavor of what that's all about, that video. Okay.
Path goal theory is a contingency model of leadership. Like other situational leadership models, it assumes that the right style of leadership is dependent on the situation or the context. In the case of path goal theory, we look at the people we are leading and the nature of the task at hand. Path goal theory was first articulated by Robert House in 1971 and then refined in an article he wrote with Gary Dessler in 1974. The name path goal theory refers to the importance for a leader to clarify the path that their team needs to follow to achieve the goal that they have set. The leader must also provide the team with the resources that it needs and remove the blockers.
So I just want to make the point is that's why I referenced that book Switch from the Heath brothers, because one of their key components of transformation is set the path. All right. So it really kind of complements, all of this going on here.
That obscure the path that they're on. Their work was very much rooted in Victor Vroom's expectancy theory of motivation, which is also the subject of one of the most popular videos on this channel, so I'll put a link in the description. The path goal model is based on the belief that team members will deliver better results if they expect two things. First, that more effort will deliver better performance, and second, that improved performance will lead to better rewards. So, people want to see leadership behaviours that deliver the direction, the guidance, the support and the training that they need. Greater clarity around goals and explanation of what precisely is required will lead to higher levels of performance and higher levels of job satisfaction too. In the path goal model, House described 4 leadership styles that we can select based on 2 main.
Okay, so that's all I'm going to leave you with this one. And here's Vroom's expectancy model. So you can see that more effort will give better results, and then rewards for individual performance will get better results, and all this is worked into that piece. And we talked about when I talk about goals, that's why I'm so hepped on giving you the sense of how to write better effective goals, is because if you have clear goals, this all supports the path goal theory, along with really giving the people the tools and the insights to be able to do what they need to do for the organization. Okay, so that's what that piece was all about. Okay, all right. Okay, but situational variables break down into, again, you could see this is highlighted, personal characteristics, the people, the followers. These variables include individuals, motivation, readiness, role identity. And role identity, again, is tied into culture, right? If they feel that they're part of the shared vision, if they feel, if you take a look at the like the fire service, they're really big on the decor and the uniform, and whatever. It's all part of setting up that role identity that really makes them feel that, hey, this is who I am, and this is what I'm part of, and it's bigger than I am, kind of thing. And then the environmental variables, that's where the situation comes in. Leader includes the factors such as, how the organization is put together, the available resources, the collaboration. This is all about, setting the path, right, to be able to get things done. And here you can see this, nice little yellow piece. So we're going to talk about, this arrow, in terms of a situation where a follower lacks self-confidence. Well, the leader behavior should be supportive leadership. And why? Because it increases the confidence to achieve the work. And what's the outcome? More effort improves satisfaction and performance. So this is, really in line with, Vroom's expectancy theory as well. So that's where that's coming in. So the two things, here's how they fit, in terms of, the aspects of subordinates' personality and then the characteristics of the environment. So if you take a look at McDonald's, McDonald's is a high structured organization. All the cooking is on timers. All the procedures are all trained into people. It's all, very, anybody could come in and learn what has to be done. It's not if someone's off the job that, they can't get stuff done. All right. And then high formalization and social support. So those are the key things. So here, start understanding that there's different types of leadership. And the main categories are transactional versus transformational. So if you look at transactional, you could think of people who, if you do this, I do that. If you do this, I give you a reward. Transformational is, I'm inspiring you to get over your self-interest and understand that this organization is bigger than all of us, and where we're going and what we can do for society is amazing, right? So that's what transformation is all about. And you can see here in terms of transformational leadership, enabling others to act, challenging the process, modeling the way, and modeling behavior in leadership is key. I mean, if people, look at what you do, not so much as what you say, and that's really important. And then encouraging the heart, so you're really trying to win hearts and minds, along with supporting them, physically and logistically with getting the job done, and then inspiring that shared vision, which is really key. So, Bezos, very much of a charismatic, enthusiastic, self-confident leader, whereas Musk is mainly, he sets the direction, right? And you can see now he's wearing this Mars T-shirt, in the last few news cycles. So, that's what he's all about, is, showing, what the end result looks like. And then when we're into leading teams, the priority of team leaders, they need to manage the team's external boundaries. So basically, they're a broker. They set up the relationships outside the boundaries of the team so the team members can source information or source resources or whatever, and then they facilitate the team process. And so that's where the liaison and the external constituencies come in. They're troubleshooters. They work on conflict management. And then I'm hoping, this learning team charter really gives you the sense of, what you could use that device for in terms of dealing with conflict management, having authentic conversations, and then the coaching part. So leading teams is a real key skill to have in today's economy. There's no doubt about it. And this, understand, groups versus teams. There's work teams and there's work groups. So take a look at the goal. Well, you may have a team that has to solve a particular specific problem. Well, it's a collective performance. Whereas a work group, so say 100 people in a call center, all they need to do, is share minimal amounts of information. I mean, they're all individuals, basically not collaborating, but working towards measures and KPIs that are designed by computer measurement. All right, In terms of synergy, a work team, well, it's positive. Everybody's got their, everybody else's back. They're complementing each other's skills. Work groups, it's probably neutral, because they're doing their own thing in a call center. Accountability, there's individual and mutual. In a work group, they're performing against a computer standard and computer reporting. Skills, again, complementary. Work groups, random and varied. So you need to understand the difference, right, between groups and teams, when it comes to those kind of things. Again, I introduce you to Tuxman's stages of group development, right from the beginning, hoping that you'd really get to use those concepts and hopefully, take that with you when you leave this program. And again, now there's been, an addition, and normally he came out with forming, storming, norming, and performing, but now there's a journey. And something that really really made an impact on me is that I'll give you a sense of, one of the programs that I worked on. So IT telephone came in and replaced what they call a small switch that used to be put in Centrex, which used to be put in buildings. And the thing is, the Centrex system was one of the most successful projects in basically TELUS's history. All right, and when IP telephony came in, the technology was much better. It was what we would call it, an interrupting technology, a disruptive technology that really just was much better, faster, cheaper. But the thing is that the Centrex group was still there because there was existing customers that still had Centrex, and they wouldn't let go, right? And they should have. And there was this competing forces inside that, the Centrex were holding back, having some of their customers evolve to IP telephony. And so adjourning is a really important part of a project, to look at, how you transition, to the end state, the new beginning. And that's really important. So that's a whole new level of Tuxman stages of group development. Okay. So you can see here, and I talked about this earlier as well, in the storming part, you've got to let this happen as a manager. Communication of feelings, view themselves as individuals, resist control by group leaders, intergroup conflict. The whole idea in the storming part of Tuxman's stages of group development is that you need to get the issues on the table and deal with them. And if you don't get the issues on the table, they will come back to bite you. All right. They will, as soon as there's a sort of a setback, then people will raise that issue because it wasn't resolved. And that's why it's so important to let this happen, this storming, to get it all out, and so that you're all aligned and you can start norming in a very effective way to be able to set the standards for future work and be successful. So that's really what that was all about. I'm not going to talk too much about transformation, but transformation is going to be a big part of your lives when you leave this program, and so that you really should understand the opportunity to define this bold ambition, and it goes beyond incremental change. So change management is just a tool to be able to get you through a transformation, and understand that piece. So both are important. The change, that's the tools, but the transformation, that's where you make the leaps and bounds. And the whole idea in the change is to hold on and create that new beginning and stick with it, and then institutionalize it, so that it is the new way that business is done, in the organization. Okay, so here's the thing in change management. Organizational change, any alteration of people or structure or technology, and change agent, someone who acts as a catalyst. So it's not necessarily just the manager, the leader that drives change. There's a lot of thought leaders in the organization, and you should seek those out. There's people in the organization that don't have position power, but they have a lot of influence in influencing their colleagues and counterparts. And by finding those people and adopting them as change agents will go a long way in helping you get through a transformation. And what you need to understand in change, and you can see that there's yellow arrows here, is that sometimes a need for change is totally driven by an external change. And sometimes an external change will force an internal change to go forward. And other times it's just a recognition that the organization needs to change, and it's done only because of you start realizing in your organization that it's not the way it's working the way it could, and then that will cause a justification to get for a change. So in some cases, so on the internal forces, it's change in strategy or changes in the workforce or changes in employee attitudes, whereas external, it's all those things that we talk about in PESTLE, PESTLE, and what your participation activities are all about. So here's just a research piece that I found way back when, and the survey went out and said, why do you think your projects fail? Because it's a large proportion. It's like 65% of projects in North America fail over a period of at least over 5 years, and that's just amazing. And they say, well, why? Well, we didn't have the right technology. That was the main reason. And then we didn't have the infrastructure to help us get through. And then, oh yeah, well, we didn't do change management very well. But when they went back and they looked at the root causes, lo and behold, change management was the biggest factor in getting over the transformation. And technology was the least factor. So it makes a big argument for understanding what change management is all about. And the whole idea then is to get commitment, versus compliance. What does that mean? So compliance is, oh yeah, well, they're telling me I have to do this, so I'm going to do it. Rather than saying, hey, they've convinced me that we need to get this done to be successful and for me to be successful in this organization, and I'm committed to do it. And that's where it really comes into play in managing the post-implementation resistance. You get that commitment as soon as you possibly can, and they'll understand why people resist change in terms of education or participation or that. So it's a good idea to go through this piece. Here's a little bit of research that I did personally, and what I found from Jane Dutton is that if there's a good doability of getting the change done, and there's urgency, then the level of change will be high. And what I mean by doability is that, you take a look at, there's this concept called deliberate practice. And what that is if you're trying to learn a new skill, you want to take your capabilities to the next level. So you need to do a stretch, but the stretch can't be as much of a stretch that it's overwhelming. It's got to be doable. So you've got to manage that stretch so that you know that you can achieve that. And then you place urgency on that in terms of deadlines and whatever. And that's what increases your level of change. So that's key. And something that I learned, and, especially through, at that time it was Anderson, but now it's Accenture. I did a lot of projects for them in terms of transformation. We did a complete organizational model change or transformation, for TELUS way back when. And what happens is on every different transformation, what you'll get is a certain level of performance when it first starts. That's where you break out the cake and the coffee and the cookies, saying, yeah, we're going to do this great thing. But as people start seeing that maybe they're losing something and it's not quite working, the performance of the organization is going to drop. And they call this the valley of despair. And it happens in every project. And now if you're a manager and you know that this is going to happen, well, what you do is you try to celebrate, all the wins that you possibly can that are coming along before you hit that point to get them through, that phase of the transition. All right. And and use the things that are working for you and highlight that, because at some point in time, then things will start tracking, and then you use these continuous improvement to use, to reach new heights. And that's what this looks like. It's almost a fear or anger piece. And then you start exploring and accept, and then here you're rebuilding. But what you're doing then is you're reinstitutionalizing what's going on. And that's where this piece comes in, is that, it takes a long time. And if you don't do it right, you're going to get compliance, and then it'll stop. A lot of projects just, drop off the mark, drop off the schedule. Sometimes you'll get the formal compliance, but what you really need to do is get the commitment, and people understand that change, and you get that genuine compliance. And what then you start doing is you start institutionalizing the new beginnings, the new tools that you're using, where that's totally internalized. And then all of a sudden now, you've solidified it in your future. And that's what this is all about. You want to know anything about that? This is an old book, 2003, but William Bridges, that changed my life. All right. And he talks about the ending and the new beginning and getting through the neutral zone. And this is a fantastic book if you ever want to understand transformation, especially personal transformation as well. It applies. Okay. Here's Lewin's model, really important. 3 phases of organizational change. I've used this, and the whole key component is unfreeze. And then what that means is you're making that case for change. You're saying, hey, if we keep going like this, we're going to be bankrupt in 2 years. Here's the data. This is what it's showing. We're losing market share. We're doing, and you unfreeze that. And then you say, okay, so here's what we really need to do, all right, to be able, and you go through a learning process. You go through this action planning. You go through this action steps, all right? So let me go back to this piece. You're starting to come up here, all right? And then in this piece here, the refreezing, this is where you're institutionalizing and internalizing, those changes, so that then they're locked in, and you've achieved those behavioral changes. You've got measurement and systems redesigned to be able to keep you through that transition. So again, unfreezing, changing, and refreezing, Lewin's 3 phases. It's probably a good question on the test about this. All right. Here's a little more to kind of understand what this is all about. I'm not going to talk about this right now. But the thing is, here's something that personally that I learned about, is that a lot of organizations try to bring in too much change. And what you need to do is you need to have levels of change that are digestible. All right. And so that, you make learning a way of life. You ensure that you've got these diverse teams that are going through. You encourage these mavericks, and you don't give the organization too much change to undergo for transformation. But the whole idea, communicate. That's what keeps it going. I know that, in some of those large projects that I managed, a lot of rumors surfaced. People were going to be laid off. Here's where, they're going to change the way we do things and we don't like it and whatever. We actually started a newsletter called The Grapevine. And as soon as we heard of a rumor about something going on, we'd post that rumor and show that it was misinformation, and then clarify on what we were really trying to do in particular areas. And I'll tell you, you wouldn't believe the success results out of that particular newsletter. Okay, so communication, you're transferring the understanding and meaning from one person to another. So transformation coupled with the right communication is key. Right. And that's why we're going to get into a little bit of the technology of communication here. So when does effective communication occurs? When the complete message reaches the intended receiver. When the receiver translates the message accurately. When the receiver understands the message the way the sender intended it to be understood. So I'm going through this every day with you guys. All right. Like I try to send out as many messages, of the same message as I possibly can, so that I can reach all of you. Right? That's the one thing. And then what I try to do is, if any of you come back and have a misinterpretation, I will clarify that message, all right, to make sure. And then then I always leave it open to, hey, if you don't understand it, please, send me an email, and I will try to, better clarify and really give you a sense of, what it was intended for. I'm always trying to show you, where this is going and why you should be able to do it this way and what the benefits are. And if I don't do that effectively, let me know, all right? Because I want to improve on that. So that's what that communication process is all about. But in the technology, there's a sender, so that's me. There's the encoding, all right? So I'm sending messages by video. I'm sending messages throughout the announcements of Blackboard. I'm sending messages in the commentary presentations. I'm sending emails to you, all right? And then, I should be telling you each time, why am I sending you this message? What do I want you to achieve, based on that? And then what's the right channel? In certain areas, I leave it to the Blackboard announcement method. In other areas, I may send you directly an email, right? So, that's where that comes from. And then, the process has, more. There's the receiver. So I really need to get a sense of who you are and are you decoding my message properly? And I know that some of my instructions on the communication side that I build, sometimes some people just they don't understand it, and I try to find a way that, okay, how can I better explain or sent that message so that they would get it, and maybe sometimes it's even where I put the message on an illustration, right? And then looking for feedback. So coming back saying, hey, I didn't quite get what you said. What was it? And use that feedback to better clarify. For that's what it's all about. So effective communication, here's the actual process that's going on. And it's the transfer of understanding and meaning from one person to another. So this is a key piece. You can see that it's highlighted in yellow, that you should know about that. And it's so important, to communicate effectively when you're undergoing change. And when I say change, I mean transformation. That's, CEOs have to be committed and model the change. Management, has to, again, model their actions. People are not dumb, all right? If they watch people, and here's something that I learned, all right? People judge people by their behaviors, but they judge themselves by their own intentions, all right? So what does that tell me is that if I'm going to tell you to do something, I'm going to tell you what my intention is and why you should be doing it, and then I will model that, I hopefully, 100%, to be able to show you why it's so important. Okay, so that's what that's all about. And face-to-face organization communication, you can't, you can't underscore that. And I know myself, especially when I was a process engineer, when I had a job, I would go out into the field and talk to the people who were going to, create that or complete that job. And let them know, what, go through the plan with them and whatever. And that went a long way. And I got a lot of benefits and acclamations, for doing it that way. So it works. And find better ways to deliver bad news. And the thing is, that's part of trust, is that, you need to give them, you need to be transparent in what's going on. All right. So again, you can see here that emotions play a big piece in decoding, all right? And how a receiver feels, and you can see this is highlighted, how a receiver feels when a message is received will influence how they interpret it. And so that you really got to, especially when you're communicating, through an email, you really got to try to get into the insights of what the situation is, so that you can kind of diffuse what that situation is, and really create an understanding of why you're requiring a certain commitment or whatever. And that way you'll get through those emotions and get to a better result with with your receiver. So reaching negatively to a message when you're upset, I mean, that's, you just don't want to do that. You get a, and I used to, especially corporately, I get these emails where someone, complained about what I was, what I was asking for. And I tend to say, oh, but I, it paid off to, to sit back and say, really, what is the problem here? Is it something that I didn't explain properly? Get into it and then calm down before I reply. Right. So, that's something that, you could take heed in any kind of communication that you make. All right. So creating a shared vision for change. This is key. There's a technique called appreciative inquiry. And the best way to explain this is the glass is half full. So you start with what's working. What are we doing right? And again, if you take that book called Switch, the Heath brothers talk about find the bright spots in the organization where things are actually progressing, for a change that maybe isn't working in another part of the organization. Now you have something to show, what's going on, all right, of what's going on, and really kind of say that, hey, here's what we got going for us, rather than, oh, well, this isn't working right now. Okay. So appreciative inquiry focuses on the strengths to create a vision about what the organization could become. So, in the discovery, you're saying, yes, the glass is half full, not half empty, and you're identifying what is. And then you start looking at, okay, what could that look like? And then you design and then you deliver on that. So that's what that's all about. Creativity versus innovation. Creativity is the ability to produce novel and useful ideas. And where innovation is, this is taking that creativity and making something of it, a useful product or a service or a method of operation. So that's what that's all about. And then, in the creative process, there's preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. That's where, that's where the illumination is the aha moment. All right. The illumination, you notice that it's highlighted, and we're going there. I talked about that. Okay. Just a little bit about organizational culture and national culture. So that especially this applies when, when you're going internationally, you have an organizational culture in your company, and say you want to establish a base in a different culture, a different country, well, that has a different national culture, and you have to be aware of, what that means. And the example I can think about is that, I spent some time in Ontario, and Honda came to Ontario to build Honda cars in a town or city just north of Toronto. And for a few years, the employees couldn't understand, what the management was looking for, until they started explaining about total quality management and the benefits and the insights that you could gain from doing total quality management, and the national culture, of the workers in that particular town, weren't versed in that, and didn't see the themes that are going through. And once that clicked, once the corporate culture adapted to the national culture of the area, then everything started to work, to change corporate culture. So that's what's all about. And just understand that there's a lot of, things under, this is, especially when we talked about diversity as well, there's a lot of things under the iceberg that you don't see. And, you gotta understand that. A little bit about different types of culture. There's clan culture, and this is, an employee-focused culture. A lot of times what you have is what I would call elders in that corporate culture. And what they do is when they onboard, they mentor these people coming in, and they really kind of have a way of explaining, the corporate culture and the norms in that organization, and how they're being, supported by that. Adhocracy culture, this is a typical entrepreneurial culture. This is like get the job done. Adhocracy meaning, whatever needs to get done, you do it right away. A market culture, well, this is very, very competitive. And, if you take a look at companies like PepsiCo or whatever, it's an absolute, it's in a cutthroat, low margin businesses in most cases. And, responsiveness is really important. And profits, are because of low margins are really important. And that's valued over employee satisfaction. It's very stressful to work in a market culture. And then the hierarchy culture, this is valuing stability and effectiveness. And this is where, loss of life or loss of property is involved. So a hierarchical culture, is standard in the military, in the police service, in the fire service, in nuclear operations, because there's so much risk involved. So that's where that comes to piece. So here's how to kind of take a look at it. And that's it for this particular topic. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take an 8-minute break and then come back and we'll start topic 9. Okay? If you have any questions, just place them on the chat, and I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, we'll get started on topic 9, and I'm making your attention to the two Robbins PowerPoint presentations that are affiliated with topic 9, but and I have a reason for just bringing this one up. Environmental constraints on managers. Slides 2 to 14 inclusive. So that's a key one that I want to address. Explaining what the external environment is and why it's important, and explain how environmental affects managers. And then chapter 4 is about the planning and strategic management. So there's a lot of rich information there that'll help you, on the test and understand the concepts that that we're going to cover in topic 9. Okay, so in that chapter 4, the chapter 4 PowerPoint, the nature and purpose of planning, compare and contrast approaches to goal setting. And again, goal setting is just so important. I can't say enough about that. And if you go into your career understanding the effectiveness of good goal setting, I promise you'll really see some success. We're going to talk about a little bit of contemporary issues in planning, and talk about strategic management and the kinds of strategies that managers use. All right, and there's a hierarchy of strategies that we're going to talk about in terms of corporate strategy and business strategy and functional strategy, and how that kind of all comes from down from the top. So that's what we're going to talk about. But I want to bring back this thing. All right, triple bottom line. Here's where you can really take this concept, in the new age, to be able to use strategic planning and corporate planning to the best of your ability to do well for society and the environment and profitability or prosperity. And what to really understand about that is that the triple bottom line is the key approach, drivers of the circular economy. And you're going to hear a lot more about the circular economy, as you leave this program. And what is the circular economy? It's when you're putting together an offering, you're really trying to enhance as much sustainability as you possibly can. So let's say that you're putting together a new engine. Well, at the end of life of that engine, we normally used to talk about cradle to grave. At the end of the life, in the grave, well, what would happen is that engine would land up in a dump, all right, in a waste facility. And now we talk about cradle to cradle design. And what that is that's the essence of circular economy. And the more that we can think that way, where it's incorporated right in the design and manufacturing, and then emphasize you're the retailer and the consumer, and the reuse or repair or recycling, and the recycling sector, so that you get the most out of the materials, out of the energy that was put together to create that offering. All those things come together. So that's why it's so important. So here's a little bit, this isn't on the test, but the circular economy is all about eliminating waste and pollution. It's all about circulating products and materials. So designing for durability, repairability, and upgradability. And then, regenerating natural systems. So it involves designing products and systems that can be recycled and repurposed and returned to the natural environment in a way that benefits ecosystems. So that's what this triple bottom line is all about, in terms of planet, the environment, in terms of society, people, and not exploiting people, making sure that that we are good ancestors and our future generations are just as healthy and happy and fulfilled as we are, and that's how you get to this certain piece. So on that cradle to cradle, material selection becomes in. Is it biodegradable or is it recyclable? Product design, is it repairable or easily disassembled for refurbishment or remanufacturing? How can you extend that life, or consider our product we handle at its end of life, designed for recycling? And then systemic thinking, consider the entire life cycle or product. And that's where you get all players involved in the design. right from the people who produce the raw materials and supply those raw materials to parts, to the users, to the end of life or the repairers and all those things, all comes in as how do you build a better mousetrap, for being good ancestors. Okay, so I talked about the problem statement, and I'm hoping that that came through in assignment number 3. So we're not going to cover that, but understand where we are in this continuum of management principles evolution. We're in the behavioral, quantitative, and the systems piece. And the more that you can get into systems thinking and understand that, the better you will be as a strategic planner, and the better that you will be able to understand, what the future could look like. And the more that you can do that, especially using AI, the more progressive and a front runner that you will be to be able to bring solutions to the marketplace and put you in good stead, especially if you observe, triple bottom line principles. Okay, so just a little bit more about test number 3 again. It's a one-time deal, right? On June the 18th, there's no other time that you can do this test. It's from 9 a.m. until 10:30 a.m. It's the only scheduled time. And please, if you can't make that, if something happens, I need to know immediately, because there's a lot less time to be able to get the course back on track, to be able to get the marks processed for the deadlines. You access test number 3 again remotely. In terms of off-campus online, you'll see it appear at topic 13 at 9 a.m. on June the 18th. Again, 50 multiple choice, a few truth and false questions, 80 minutes. Lockdown browser and webcam will be required for this test. So that's what this is all about. And again, here's the approach. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 chapters in the Robbins e-text that you should look at. Again, practice tests are seen sorry, that should be topic 12. All right, in topic 12, this is a misprint right here. And the thing is review all the participation activities, even in topic 13, even though the content of topic 13 will not be in the test. Look at those slide decks in Blackboard, for 9, 10, 11, and 12 topics. And then the video presentations there for clarification. The course e-text, again, is if you've missed something and all these other precursor items, then, read the test. And then this is what the link looks like in topic 13. You click on that link, and that link should appear at 9 a.m. on June the 18th. Okay. All these same instructions for test 3. If you're a Chromebook user, make sure that you go through the instructions to know what's going on. So participation activities. So 9A it's due June the 2nd. There's 2 deliverables here. One is that you have to do a pastel analysis for Tim Hortons, and you have to do a SWOT analysis for Tim Hortons. And that's really I'm going to show you how this all comes together and why this comes together. And when you do that analysis, the whole thing is that I want you to do critical thinking. And what that means is that you don't put, general things in those as factors. You make them specific to Tim Hortons. The factors are specific to conditions of Tim Hortons that will make the analysis more meaningful, more specific. And again, it will give you a sense of how to really do effective analysis going through. And what I ask you to do is use the templates. And why? Is because these templates now can be used once you use them. Keep the files, and you'll be able to rejig those to be able to do those questions if you select them in the assignment number 4 on the Amazon project, so that a lot of your work will be done for you. Okay, so that's key. So this is, if you go to this link for the PESTLE template, this is what it looks like. And again, here's an explanation of really what I tried to tell you just in the last few minutes, is that there's general economic factors. I don't want those generalities, those, those things. I want you to say, okay, here's the specific economic factor. This is how it leads to that, right? And here's an example of what that looks like. And then, why critical thinking matters. Instead of simply stating Tim Hortons is affected by the economy, a critical thinker goes further, analyzing how and why these economic forces impact Tim Hortons differently. So have a read of this before you do that piece. Again, the pastel template, you click on that link and you'll go right to the template. For the SWOT template, you click on that link and you'll go through. And here's what it looks like. All right, and here's how it connects. All right, so the PESTLE analysis leads you to do a further meaningful analysis of what this PESTLE factor represents in terms of impact, and then this from the strengths and weakness of the SWOT analysis. One of the better instruments to use is the McKinsey 7S, and we talked about that earlier, and we'll probably talk about it a little more now. It's not crucial to this participation of activities, but where the PESTLE comes into play is what opportunities are there and what threats are there. And Porter's 5 forces analysis will actually even give you a lot more insights as to what these opportunities and threats are in terms of what they represent to Tim Hortons. So here's one of the pages in the templates for PESTLE, and what I've done is I have possible things to look for. All right, and what it is that maybe you're find 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe 4 of them in here that are relevant to Tim Hortons at this particular time in the market. All right, so you take, let's just say, home market lobbying pressures, and here's under this column, you describe this specifically in Tim Hortons' outlook on what this means or what this is concerning into that, and then you actually say that you say, well, yeah, this is a high impact, so you'll put H here, and then the implications. Well, is this something they have to do right now? 0 to 6 months, that's what you put here. And then is this a positive impact or a negative impact? Is it increasing or is it decreasing? And relative importance, to Tim Hortons itself. Now, what happens is you keep, whatever you've chosen out of these suggested, and then you may add, one other general one, the example that, from your research you found. So at the end of the day, you'll only have a few of these that translate into factors specific to the organization, right? So you don't have to list all these after, just list the ones that you've used as examples and list the new ones that you've done. So that's what that looks like. And then when you do a SWOT analysis, again, these are suggestions and these outside columns. So you might look at positive competitive advantages. So you'll take this suggestion and say, okay, what's a positive competitive advantage, in terms of customized for Tim Hortons, because it's really relevant at this time. And once you've chosen, what you've, from examples, and then you may create one, by yourself. Then you eliminate this column. You don't need this anymore. And same with weaknesses. Whatever you choose from here, and then you can add to, then you eliminate this column. So really what I'm asking for is I'm asking for this as the remaining template to be submitted. Okay, so that's where that is on that piece. Okay, so to get to those links, they're on this presentation, but you can go to Blackboard and find those links as well in topic 9 to be able to do those. But here's how this works, is that the strengths and weaknesses really come from an internal analysis, and the opportunities and threats come from an external. So PESTLE, or PASTEL, however you say it, is an external analysis framework to use. McKinsey 7S is an internal. Now, you're not doing this in the participation activities, but I found This is probably the most effective internal analysis model that I've ever used over the 30 plus years of corporate planning that I've done. The five forces model, Porter's five forces model, is probably the most effective model to really kind of clarify some of the aspects that you find in the pestle analysis. All right, so that's really how that comes together. Okay, now the second topic, 9B, again, due June 2nd. I want you again to use the templates that I've assigned here. So you use the template for the actual BSC, the balance scorecard, and then the actual strategy, or the BSC strategy scorecard template. So you'll have this template that you fill out, and then you'll have this template that you will fill out. And the whole thing is, what's really key is to show the interconnections. All right, because this is a progressive flow, and you start with what they call let me see, learning and growth, which is really organizational capacity, and that's what allows you to do internal process initiatives, and which then allows you to satisfy customers, and then which allows you to make money, right, on the financial end. And you show how these are all connected. None of these should be stranded, right? You're doing all these for a reason, and the main reason is then you start seeing the flow and connection of all, and the relevance of all the goals that you're creating. I mean, that's really the crux of strategic planning. Nothing is stranded. And I'll tell you, the biggest corporate failures that I've seen in my experience is that people brainstorm these stranded goals that have no connection to what else is going on in the organization, and it takes you down a path where you're not utilizing scarce resources effectively. Everything has to connect to everything to make it efficient and effective. That's how that works. Again, just some of you, didn't perform, the mean performance calculation properly. It's an average of each category. You can see that, the mean performance for finances was 4 + 5 divided by 2. This, if you're for processes, was all these numbers divided by 6, to give you that number. Some of you didn't do that. All right. So I want you to do that. And again, here's how to understand those connections of how things, help other goals. Show those interconnections, link those goals with arrows from the bottom up. So you can see there that, goal LG2, creates the foundation for goal LB3. All right. So that's how that works. And the order analysis really comes from the Balanced Scorecard Institute, where improvements in internal capacity, which is learning and growth, drives improved internal processes, which drives improvement in customer and stakeholder satisfaction, which drives improved financial results. And that's how that piece, all comes together. So those are the participation activities that you have to, be cognizant of how to deal with. And again, if you have any questions, please email me, and I'd be happy to kind of explain. Wanted to bring you back, this, we've seen this chart before. You can see a lot of highlighting going on here. But again, competitive advantage. This is what strategic planning is all about. How you create and sustain competitive advantage. And again, you got to understand that, you develop through different strategies, cost leadership or differentiation or first mover advantage, whatever, strategy that you have, you develop that strategy and then you deploy it. And then at some point in time, your competitors start understanding what you're doing and they want to eat part of your lunch, so they start eating into your market. And then those strategies, start on a decline. You got to understand that, this is all part of the process. So, as you're deploying, and if you're starting that decline, you got to start planning well ahead. Am I going to recalibrate with that strategy? Am I going to replace it? what am I going to do? So, that's why you need a strategic plan. That's why you need, at least a 5-year timeline. And if you want to do it properly, you should be looking at a 10-year plan. Okay. All right. And then understand that it's a cascade of levels, right? So you're at the board level where that's very strategic. And then what that does is it sets the context for what the middle level of management, has to do. And then it sets the context for, what the functional management will have to do at the operational level. And all managers plan in some way, all right? They're doing this at their different levels. And, that's what keeps things going. And you notice that this is probably a test question. Okay. And again, so here we are, we talked about the different levels of management. So top level managers, they're at the strategic planning level. The middle managers, they're at the tactical plan level where, they're at business or division levels or geographical, levels. And then the low level managers are at the operational. And all these cascade, they all have to align. And, we're going to talk about management by business objectives, later on. And it's a way of, connecting these where, the supervisor, agrees with the subordinate what their objectives are going to be, at this level, and then that subordinate will, agree with their subordinate at this level, and so that what you have is a clear alignment of cascading goals and objectives as you go through there. All right, but the key thing of what I've learned, in strategic planning, is understanding the system that it's in. And in the system, there's all these interdependencies, and it's the interdependencies that will give you a better understanding of how you can maneuver and make a change for the greater effectiveness of the overall outcome. All right. So interdependencies are key. All right. How does this all come together? And skills to perform strategic planning, analytical, critical thinking, vision and strategic thinking, leadership, communication skills. The biggest breakdown in strategic planning is execution. Why? They're not communicated properly. They're not measured properly. And then financial acumen, the project management aspect of making this work, getting through the barriers in terms of problem solving, the negotiating skills, how quickly you adapt, how creative you are, what kind of collaboration, works. So cultivating all these skills will really give you, the leg up on strategic planning. All right. So, here's a golden key. All right. The organization is made of parts: input, process, output, feedback, environment. You start to focus on external forces. That's where you start. All right. And you understand where that is and how that is in the cycle itself of develop, deploy, decline. And I'm not going to talk about this too much, but the starting point is that, where are we now? And that's the key. How did we get here so far? Where are we going? Knowing that, that really is the starting point. And then, there's all these other pieces of, vision, value, and goals as you go through. This is one of my creations. It's all good to have this, but really, focusing on what the value proposition and what the strategy is and the business model. If your strategy is right and your business model builds competitive advantage, then it's all about the execution. And I can't say enough about execution. And what you need to do is look at those cross-functional decisions, those interdependencies that enable the organization to achieve its objectives. And then, when you do that, and that strategy is the long-term plan that determines the direction of that organization. Here's an advertisement. This is probably one of the best softwares I've ever come across. I haven't looked at software for a couple of years, but if you're looking for ways to empower and engage people in strategic planning, Cascade Strategy is the way to go. And here's a typical strategic management model. Where you start with the environment, you look at what's going on competitively, you look at, your domain, you look at where you set in terms of your value proposition and your mission, and then you start looking at your strengths and weaknesses. And then, here's what I work with my clients. And what you're doing is you're building a strategic house. So right, your foundation is your core values. And what you've done is you've taken your vision and you've actually, chunked it out so that you can deal with the key elements so that it's not overwhelming. And when I said that, transformation has to be doable, that's really how you're doing that. But how you guide that is your vision. Your vision drives everything. Your mission is the business that you're in, but you should be aware of what makes you successful and understand your critical success factors. And putting this all together then will really give you a sense of what goes on. But again, on the strategic planning process, evaluate your current performance. That's the first step, all right? That is the first step in all these things, and then how is that environmental thing affecting you, and then going through. Again, evaluate current performance. You can see there's a piece here. I talked about McKinsey S. Well, that's where, you're doing the internal environment, determining, what's successful, assessing your strengths and weaknesses as an organization. From the external point of view, here's where, you scan that environment, within the lens of your core values and your mission and vision. And all right, so that's a key piece. Okay, talked about that. Here's how the cascade goes from mission statement all the way down to strategic and tactical and operational goals, and they're cascading as they go through, and then how you'll measure success. What gets measured gets done, and in most cases there's too many measurements in a strategic plan. So you really gotta and how to do that is to you really kind of focus on a balanced scorecard for that strategic plan and a balanced scorecard strategy map to really get into what's really key on making that work. All kinds of benefits for strategic planning. I won't go through that. What are the limitations? It's the buy-in. It's this end of it, to be able to institutionalize and internalize that transformation that the strategic plan is trying to drive. So buy-in, continue to a commitment, resource allocation, and alignment. And I talked about project management charters, which was the basis for the student learning charter. And what it is that you get sponsors to sign off on those project charters, and then when you get into problems of competing for resources, you go back to those sponsors and say, hey, you signed off on this, and this is what I need to be able to do what I need. And then I talked about the power of alignment. All right, so here's where we are in terms of PESTLE, those different components, and then what that breaks down into, different areas. And then here's this, this template that I want you to fill out. Here's a little bit more about McKinsey 7S. The structure. Remember, we talked about form follows function. So you want to make sure that you know what your strategy is. Before you go and you evaluate that strategy. When they talk about skills in the 7S model, they're really talking about core competency. What organizational skills support the core competencies that provides competitive advantage in the strategy. Shared values is the culture of the piece. The staff is, the type of people that you need to recruit to be able to sustain the core competencies. And the management style, depends on the industry that you're in. And, we talked a lot about management style, but, you want to evaluate, are managers using the proper style across the organization to be most effective in their business and their industry, across from, what the competitors are doing. So that's key. Porter's 5 forces, one of the best, templates going on, where you'd look at the competitive rivalry, the threat of new entrants coming in, the bargaining power of your suppliers, the threat of substitutes, that could eat some of your market in terms of, they may not be exactly what you're producing, but they provide the same kind of benefits to your customers, and they may be cheaper, or they may be available better, or whatever. So you really have to be aware of that. And then the bargaining power of your buyers itself. So that's a key piece. So here's a little more information. Here's a little more on the key of knowing what how to deal with entrance. Well, maybe sometimes you could put up barriers. Sometimes, if you have better economies of scale to get your unit cost down, you could be more competitive. Sometimes it's, or a combination of these, brand loyalty, the capital requirements, those kind of things. So this is one piece to kind of understand what that's going about. This is just for, your information of, one of these templates that I created. I get my clients to go through this to get a better understanding of, what do you have right now in that factor, and then what do you need in the future to be able to go through the SWOT process. Well, really, what you're trying to do is you're looking at what are your strengths versus the opportunities, so you can so you could seize on these opportunities. What are your strengths, that are going to help you get through, the threats that you're seeing? What are your weaknesses that won't allow you to take on these opportunities? What are your weaknesses that will be very subjective to, the threats that are out there? And then when you do that, you come down to actually, creating, a problem statement or an issue statement that relates to a problem statement to be able to do better planning under that. And, here's key to understand what your opportunities can be, what your weaknesses can be, what your strengths and your threats can be, based on general factors. And it comes down to then, making specific assertions around the factors that are relative to your organization, going through the critical elements of how they impact your organization. And so that, here's a little more about, what SWOT is all about, to go reading through them. Here's some typical, categories of factors. And then here's how it all connects, like I showed you earlier. And then again, what I say is only show the factors that the group has chosen, so that you can get rid of these two columns, when you're done, doing your analysis. So here's how, here's the precursor to generating goals. You see what's going on in the environment, and you get an idea, and when we say environmental scan, there's external environmental scan and then internal environmental scan, and then a competitive analysis. So you see where you stand, right? And then you create these problem statements, either good problems or bad problems. And then from there, you create goals to satisfy, what you need to work with here in terms of, opportunities or some threats. So this is key in terms of using a strategic issue template. So I've laid out, the template for a strategic issue. Create a title. And why just a title is because when you've got this whole plan together, and you want to talk about it, just a title for a particular issue then will save you a lot of communication time. A title for a goal save you a lot of communication time, and getting to the crux of what you need to do with that particular planning element. And then here, where you do the overview, provide a brief description. 90% of the solution is created, when you describe the problem. Give some context, the factors leading to the issue, what the impact will be, who are the stakeholders, how urgent is that. And then here's a view of an example of creating a strategic issue and on going through that. Here's an example of doing a problem statement, for assignment 3. Here's a goal template where, title for the strategic goal, putting a goal statement together, the rationale, the objectives, the timeline, the metrics. Here's an example of one, that was put together. And the actual key performance indicators used in those goals. Here's the template for really kind of getting a sense of where you're going to find these and how you're going to use them. And then here's an example of that. Personal mission, we're beyond that for 3, and we're not going to do that. But just a little bit about goal execution. If you've got too many goals, say you've got 11 to 20 goals in a plan. Well, to really achieve excellence, you're probably not going to achieve excellence on any. If you run 4 to 10, and you might achieve excellence on 1 to 2. But if you have wildly important goals, 2 to 3, then your chances of achieving excellence are great. And it's all about economics, right? It's all about opportunity cost and scarce resources. What's it going to take, to be able to satisfy a goal? And if you got too many goals, then you don't have the right amount of resources for the wildly important goals, where you're going to really make strides in moving the transformation for that strategic plan. And all this you can find in the Franklin Covey Institute. A key. Not going to cover these pieces, but I wanted you to kind of, we're getting into strategy now. You should understand what the Boston Consulting Group Matrix is all about. This is an old model. I think it goes back to the 70s, but it talks about the product mix as part of the strategic planning. And it, we talked about the evolution of that, so that you really need to understand, where your stars are, and you want to invest those stars, and know where your cash comes from, where what's the main part of your business and how to manage that, and then where there's some areas that are just not doing it for you anymore, and you need to divest, and then some of the things that you want to invest in, they're question marks, so you need to have caution, right? So this is key. You got to understand this piece. There's going to be some questions in the test about this. So understanding, these two axes, all right? So this is market growth, and this is relative market growth share. So here's where, the stars are coming in, is that, this is, you're finding a great opportunity, and that it's going to grow. So that's worth some investment. And the thing is here is that, that you can gain high market share as well. All right. So this is high market share right here. And that this cash cow here is really, it's the most profitable. It's high cash returns. It's high market shares, large number of customers. So this side of the graph is really important to you. This may present an opportunity, but take a look at it. It's got low market share, but high market growth rate. So it could mean something to you. And I know that, when I was in marketing, in the power business, we looked at, we didn't look at intermediate oil and gas companies. We were always interested in the large companies, and we didn't realize that those intermediate gas companies, over a period of 10 years, they landed up to be the large gas companies. So they were question marks that we really should have invested a lot more effort into, to create that relationship, to build power requirements for them, right? This one here, the dogs, low market share, operates in slowly growing market, very low cash returns. So you want to divest, of these pieces. So this particular slide is really important. If you want to know more, here's a link to that. And hope is not a strategy. All right. You got to emphasize, on knowing, what is out there. It's a major course of action, and it's very flexible. All right. So that you may have some organizational learning that you need to do as you're, deploying this strategy, because, you may come up to unexpected barriers that you have to recalibrate for. and you deal more with actions that should be taken. And strategy involves trade-offs. So it's as much about what you're not going to do as what you are going to do when you're doing your strategic plan. Why? Because of scarce resources, because of doability, right? So, you got to pick, you got to do those key trade-offs. And the thing is that, as you go down, your goals are broader than your strategies. Your strategies get to be more specific as you go through, and your strategies, go to that next level that I call strategic objectives, where the rubber hits the road, right? And again, as you go through, this is sort of the hierarchy or the cascade of goals. Go to organizational strategy, go to functional strategies, and here's when you're right down into the layers of working with the customers. Okay, so here's the 3 levels of strategy. So corporate strategy translates into business strategy, translates into functional strategy. So you'll see on the corporate strategy, growth. Well, are we going to be local, or do we want to go internationally? Are we going to be about stability and only invest and produce in an area that makes sense for us, that has long-term stability? Or, do we need to kind of recalibrate or retrench because, we've been in this business for 10 years and now we really need to get a sense of where we're going. Business strategy, here's where our friend here, Michael Porter, comes in terms of his generic strategies of cost leadership, differentiation, and market focus. And now we're into the functional strategies, where each function now has to really understand, what are the drivers for corporate and business strategy, and then how can I be most competitive, at the interface of the market. Okay, so then the corporate strategy, and we're getting into maybe something that you should be concerned about in terms of a test question. So corporate strategy breaks down to a growth strategy, a stability strategy, a retention strategy, and knowing what growth strategies are. It could be concentration, it could be backwards vertical integration, forward vertical integration, horizontal integration, related diversification, or unrelated diversification. So just let me go through these. So concentration is, hey, you know what? We're only going to, be in the apple juice business, and that's what we're going to do. And we're going to be the best apple juice producer in the world, and that's where we're going to do. Backwards vertical integration is, oh, okay, yeah, well, we want to produce apple juice, but we don't have confident supplies of apples, to make that apple juice. So backwards vertical integration is, okay, we're going to buy an apple orchard, and we're going to start supplying apples to our business that makes apple juice. And then say, oh, okay, we can't get in enough channels so to sell our apple juice. So forward vertical integration is, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to distribute, our apple juice, and so that we're not just a supplier. We're going to have we're going to buy out or create an agency that can supply our apple juice to retail operations. Oh, but hang on, there's another apple juice competitor out there that's breaking into our market share. So from a horizontal integration, we buy that apple juice producer out. So that's horizontal integration. So we're here, and then our competitors here. So that's horizontal. Here's where we decided we were going to buy the apple orchard, and then here's where we decided that we're going to have an agent to be able to distribute our apple juice, and then now this competitor that we bought, will send all its apple juice to that distributor in terms of forward vertical integration, and then related diversification. So here we have different competitors that have the same kind of distribution, so that there's an orange juice producer. So we may buy an orange juice producer, and that's related diversification, because we can sell that orange juice through our actual distributor to all these retail operations. So that's just the related diversification. And then sometimes we might think, okay, hey, you know what, containers are really important to our businesses, so that's an unrelated diversification, and we might buy out an actual container manufacturer. All right, so that's how that works. Now, in terms of the actual different types of strategies here, so here's the on the growth strategy, there's concentration. We talked about vertical integration, horizontal integration, cost leadership. We talked about diversification. Now on the stability strategies, we could have, we're not going to change anything. I remember one of the cereal companies, were worried about their future, and they said that, we're just going to farm harder, which means we're just going to do what we do a lot better. Or sometimes they will say, okay, well, now we need to do, a profitability-driven strategy to make sure. The other one is, a retrenchment strategy where things aren't working out anymore. So we're going to do a turnaround, or we're actually going to divest. So we'll sell off part of our company. And then another one is a reinvention strategy. These are all corporate strategies, right? A reinvention strategy where we're saying, oh, you know what? The market is changing. And you can see that maybe, the video companies, I can't remember the names, they might have decided, hey, you know what? It might be time to go into streaming, to make sure, because, some of our businesses are just going to go the way of the dodo bird, right? Or just the revolutionary strategies where you could use disruptive technologies and look at going in there. But in the retrenchment strategies, one of the key ones is turnaround. And you can see that you should know a little more about the turnaround strategy. So I gave you, an example here. So where Apple had addresses serious performance issues. So Steve Jobs left the company and it went down. All right. So, in the next year or so, coming back, he came back with a new strategy, and it became the world's leading tech company. And, at that point in time, he said, you know what, we're going to limit the number of products that we produce, and they're all going to be top quality. Right. And that strategy kind of changed, turned them around to be able to get where they, where they had to go. So again, some more information to read about that piece. Here's a little bit about Michael Porter's generic strategy, another one of my heroes. What you need to understand about this is that there's four main strategies here, right? There's low cost or differentiation. So low cost is, like Walmart, they're in a total market, they sell everything and they're in cost leadership, right? So that if you go to Walmart, you're going to be, you're going to see low prices, okay? Versus, differentiation, that, if you buy, Honda, you're going to get superior engine performance. That's a key portion of differentiation that Honda offers. Their engine technology. All right, and they may be in the total market. All right. So here's where it gets a little tricky. Some organizations decide that, okay, we're going to be cost focused, but we're only going to sell in a niche market. And what happens is, if you're just selling to a niche market, that market could disappear. That the preferences of that niche market could just disappear overnight, and then you have no one else to sell to, right? So you got to retrench when you're doing that. Or you could say, well, we want to sell these unique products to this unique niche market, and they go out of business. And then who do you sell to? Nobody, right? So this is the crux around that. And sometimes you could be stuck in the middle. So you got to understand what industry are you in, what business you're in, and what you really want to achieve for that business, and then pick a generic strategy, on the business level of what's going on, right? And here's some more details. Cost leadership is about lower price, economies of scale. Differentiation is about convenience, reputation, customization. Cost focus, low price to a key demographic. So be very careful, when you get into this part of it. Okay. Just to know about, balanced scorecard, we talked about that quite a bit, but it's all driven by vision and strategy, right? And the whole idea then is to find, some key goals in this, in this section of the BSC, and set up targets and KPIs to measure those targets, based on some objectives that have targets, I should say, and then some sub action of initiatives to satisfy those objectives or ever, as you go forward. Again, when you're doing a BSC, just remember, a small percentage of the Blackboard groups didn't calculate the mean correctly. This is just the average of these two scores. This is the average of these 1, 2, 3, 4 scores. All right, just as we go through on the strategy map, just make sure that you make those connections, and they have to align with the vision and mission, and define those business goals that that are supported and that are foundational. And again, learning and growth is really organizational capacity, which drives internal processes, which drives customers, customer goals, which drives financial goals. So that's what you need to know about this piece. Again, that's what this is all about. Here's an example. This is how the plan flows. This is, I think I did this one for a particular particular business that I did. Okay. I think we covered this piece. I talked about management by objectives. You can see that it's highlighted, and it's the approach in which specific measurable goals are jointly set by employees with their managers. All right. So one manager will go to his employee. The employee, they'll set these goals. That particular employee then is, maybe a lower level manager, and will do the same with their direct employees, and then it cascades all the way down. So it progresses towards accomplishing these goals, is periodically reviewed. The rewards are allocated on the basis of this progress. This is as old as Adam. All right, this MBO came out, many years ago, and the whole idea is this is how it goes. It cascades down. And so it's jointly set. It develops action plans. They review the objectives. They look at the rewards, and they set those objectives, at each level, based on that. I can't say enough about this book. Where this is, offering the direction, and then this is motivating and helping, and this is shaping the path. It will really get you through a transformation. It reads like a rag, and it's one of the better books on change management I've ever done. Again, thinking about, things cascade. So the vision and theory of change, we'll say, okay, well, that will determine where will we play, how will we succeed, what capabilities we will need to really set this up. And that's it. All right, that's it for topic 9. Again, I want to emphasize that please use the templates. And again, if you use those templates in the participation activities, depending on which questions you choose as a group in assignment number 4, you'll have most of your work played out for you, done, right? And you'll have some feedback along the way, with me marking those participation activities, to get a better mark and be more effective in answering the questions in assignment number 4. So that's where that's going. If you have any questions, again, please email me. test 2 is just around the corner. Again, I can't say enough about, as a group, pull out, assignment number 4 and have a look and start choosing those questions right off the bat so that, you'll know where you need to focus. And then assignment number 5 is an individual submission. The Rebels surveys play a big part in shaping, the insights that you will have to be able to answer those questions because they're individual questions and you're commenting on how the group performed, and based on, the types of parameters that are covered in the Pearson Rebel surveys. Okay. And we'll go from there. So I wish you the best, and keep the feedback coming in to me. I'd be happy to share a lot more with you. And again, even when you leave this course, if you have any questions, keep my email handy and keep me in mind if you have a question. Okay, take care. All right, bye now.